And I would be like, well, honestly, if I wasn't born into such an accepting family, maybe I would actually be trans.
Hey everybody, I'm Brad Polumbo, and welcome back to the Damage Control Podcast, where we are reclaiming the debate over LGBT issues from the crazy people who've taken it over. My guest today is Desmond Fambrini, a non-binary TikToker and teacher who has a wide array of thoughts, both controversial and not so controversial, about everything from gender identity to indoctrination in schools. Buckle up, make sure you're subscribed. Don't forget to hit that like button as we go along. And now let's get into our conversation with Desmond. Desmond, thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Absolutely.
So I first discovered you a couple years ago when you were on this Vice News debate that I think went probably a lot more viral than you expected between teachers and conservatives who were concerned about ideological indoctrination in schools. And then I started following you on TikTok, where you are a prolific poster, more than 1 million followers. You post a lot of videos. I respect the hustle. I guess I wanted to start just by asking about something that maybe you get asked about a lot, but I know you get a lot of comments about it. For audio listeners, you wear a decent amount of makeup on your face most days. I was surprised to see that you still get a significant amount of hate for that, even in 2024. Do people really still care?
In 2024, we still see a significant amount of pushback just for the makeup. And I find it so interesting because people are always saying, oh, well, it's free speech and I'm allowed to say that I hate your makeup. Yes, exactly. Just like how I'm able to express myself using makeup. So I find it very odd that say people that are hiding behind the First Amendment saying, well, I'm allowed to say that I don't like it. Yes, correct. But I'm also still allowed to wear it. So I find it very odd, very interesting that I still get that pushback. But yes, still very, very prevalent in 2024.
I just don't know why people are bothered by it. I mean, look, there's lots of looks out there in the world, and it's not the look that I choose to go for, but lots of looks aren't what I choose to go for, and it doesn't affect me at all. If it makes you happy and you like doing it, I don't really see why people get all bent out of shape over that kind of stuff. But I don't really believe in those gender stereotypes to begin with. So I think it's interesting that, especially in this crowd of conservatives that is disagreeing increasingly with a lot of gender activism and saying, no, tomboys don't have to be trans, or just liking makeup doesn't make you non-binary, are also going to be in the comment section of a male who wears makeup and yelling at him about it. The math isn't mathing for me.
The math is not mathing. Also, in the sense that, and I hope you don't think of this as like a liberal spin, but to me, it also somewhat kind of pushes forward sexism in a way, right? Because if a woman does her makeup, like if a woman kind of came to work, red lipstick on, blazer on, necklace on, eyes done, it would be considered extremely professional. And yet when a male does it, it is considered unprofessional, which also puts a higher expectation on women getting ready in the morning, which to me is an extremely sexist take. So to me, it's not even a gay thing. It's also a sexist thing. But
I've always felt bad for women because they have to do so much more work for their presentation. So much more.
And if we choose to do it, right, then we certainly can. However, it should not be expected nor dissented upon, in my opinion, when it comes to your basic biological gender or gender expression, right? I don't really understand that. I don't understand the problem, but still waiting to hear feedback.
What's funny for me, and this is a little bit of an aside, but I know you've been on TV at least a couple times. You were on Dr. Phil. If there was a period of my career where I was going on cable news a lot. And I would roll up in the morning, in particular 6, 7, 8 a.m. Yeah. I'd roll out of bed, comb my hair, throw on a suit and tie, and get there 10 minutes before it started. My female colleagues had to get up at 5 a.m., get there 2 hours early for hair and makeup, go through this whole shebang. And I'm like, that sucks. Very uneven expectations.
Very uneven expectations. I'm still a classic 4 a.m. riser to do the hair, the makeup, the shower, all of the things. And I think it's to each their own, right? Some people find pride and passion and life in the process of getting ready, and other people don't care for it. And I think that whatever works for you should work for you, regardless of your assigned gender at birth or a gender expression. I think everyone should be able to get ready how they want with a decent level of hygiene expectations. But other than that, I think that it should be free game.
Wear deodorant and don't flash us with your body parts.
And I think that's a fair expectation. Other than that, we should be good.
So I'm going to play this clip. I'm sure you don't need to see it for the millionth time, but I'm going to play it for listeners. This famous clip from the Vice News debate where you talked about how, because now you're a learning specialist, but you were a traditional teacher for many years. You had students and their parents show up on the first day, take one look at you, and then pull their kid from your class?
Sometimes with school choice, it gets a little bit tricky, right? My first class had, the first day, I had 25 students. By day 2, I had 19, because 6 parents switched out of the class because they saw me, and they were like, there's no freaking way, before I even got a word in.
As a parent, I would want to know, like, do you not think that that is okay or they're right to withdraw when they see you? Because ultimately, you're probably an excellent educator.
I appreciate that.
I have no doubt about that, but I think we get into muddy waters when we start trying to take that choice away from the parent.
Do I think that it is okay for a parent to see me and go, not around my kid? No, I don't think that's okay. I feel like that's really crossing the line because you are, for lack of better words, discriminating against me openly. That's like seeing a black teacher and being like, there's no way. It is the same. It is the same.
When you said that, did you ever expect that to go as mega viral as it did?
Well, if I've learned one thing on being on social media for so many years, it's that anything could go viral, to the point where I'm very careful. Even though I post a lot, I'm very careful with my words. I didn't expect it to go that viral, but I try to not say things that I don't truly mean and that I don't truly want people to know.
But so talk us through your perspective on this, because some people might say, based on your appearance and drawing a stereotype on your appearance, and because I follow your content, I know that you are not somebody who uses your position as a teacher to push an ideology or to brainwash kids. But to be fair, there are some people who do that, who we see on social media, and sometimes they also present in a certain way that's more gender nonconforming. Maybe that's what those parents were worried about. Doesn't mean that's fair to you to discriminate against you on the basis of the way that you look. Talk us through this.
Well, okay. So first of all, I actually would really like to clarify the idea of, and this is going to sound, I hope this sounds more kind than it does cocky. It's not fair to the kid. It's not that it's unfair to me. I'm fine, right? I really don't need your level of support. Not you, but I don't need your level of support. I don't need people approving me. I don't need people telling me I look good. I don't need kids affirming my gender. I don't need parents saying that I'm pretty. I'm a good teacher. I went to Dartmouth College. I graduated top 10% of my class. Johns Hopkins for a master's degree. If you don't want your kid to learn from me, that is their loss. And that's the issue that I have, right? Because I will outwork you as a teacher. I will be the best one in the school, right? So if your kid loses that opportunity, that is you doing your child a disservice. And that's the issue I have, because I'm going to do well regardless of your support of me, right? So I think a lot of people saw that clip and thought to themselves, well, he just wants the attention. Oh, honey, it is your loss, not mine, right? A lot of people don't know that actually out of like the 6, 7, kids that were switched out of the class immediately, 3 of them switched back because they realized that I was the strict teacher. And I know I don't appear that way whatsoever, but the lines are straight. You get the high grades and we are the best of the best because that is what I was raised. When you are queer, when you are of color, you have to be twice as good to get half as much. So I did the calculations. I have to be 4 times as good. I could do that, right? Yeah, so when it comes down to it, though, so I'd like to kind of, first of all, make that clarification. Second of all, I have to say I'm always extremely surprised about the duets that I heard from that video. That idea of like, well, Desmond, I'm sure, would discriminate against a certain individual, right? If they were wearing a cross around their neck, Desmond would be able to say, no, I don't want that person that's religious teaching his kid. Absolutely, I would never. Are you kidding? First of all, my middle name is Dela Cruz of the Cross. My family is Catholic, right? First of all, let's start with that. Second of all, do you think because you're wearing a giant cross around your neck that I wouldn't want you teaching my kid? I assume that you're a teacher of high standards. Not because of the cross, but because you're a teacher, right? I don't think you're going to be teaching your religious ideologies, just like I'm not going to be teaching gender ideologies to children. What's the curriculum in the back corner? That's what I'm going to be looking at, right? I think Amala, I think Ben Shapiro all kind of had that counter argument of like, well, I'm sure Desmond would discriminate against someone. Maybe somebody who's a felon, maybe someone who is a criminal, maybe somebody who is angry, maybe somebody who is, but even when it comes to like a political candidate, for example, right? If I walked into a room and the teacher had Make America Great Again as a t-shirt, again, this is America. We have freedom of speech, freedom of opinion, and freedom of political choice. I wouldn't necessarily showcase my own political opinion to my students. I think that's inappropriate. But a teacher's political opinion doesn't necessarily make them a good or bad teacher, right? So I'm very confused by the reactions and the counter arguments I got. I think they weren't well thought out, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think I would want to judge a teacher, and I'm not a parent, at least not yet, but I would want to judge a teacher based on actions, not appearance. So, for example, if I noticed that the teacher had a MAGA pin on their jacket, that wouldn't bother me. But if I found out they were teaching their kids their political perspective, that
That
would
would be an
bother
issue.
me if it's supposed to be math class. And
1,000%.
same thing for a Bernie Sanders pin, right? It would be more about that. In the same way, I wouldn't want to discriminate against a teacher because they were Muslim, or because they were an evangelical Christian. But if I heard they were teaching kids about their religion or pushing their religion on them, I would want them out of their class. But I think the problem I had was that people were just making a face value judgment against you solely based on your appearance. And I thought you made a good point, whereas like, because you appear to be, feminine, or you look gay, in quotes,
Right.
whatever that means.
Right, absolutely.
They think that's okay to make a snap judgment about you. But you pointed out, okay, well, what about looking at a black teacher and being like,
Right.
most
Be
people,
like,
and
oh,
bullying
yeah.
your kid. Most people would acknowledge that that's wrong. And I do
You
see
probably-
it as a comparable situation.
I do as well, right? I was actually surprised about that disconnect, right? And above all else, right, not to go holistically academic, but it's something that I don't get a chance to do too much on TikTok because it takes a good amount of breath to explain it holistically. When I say, no, you can't discriminate against a teacher and simply pull the kid out of the class because of a teacher wearing makeup, people are like, yes, we can. That's a parent's right. You don't have rights. I'm actually not saying that it shouldn't happen. I'm saying that legalities of the situation are extremely problematic, right? I was a government major focused in education policy, right? And I, interned at the district attorney's office, public defender's office, family and children's law center. I have a legal background, right? When it comes to the designation of public funds, every teacher and their gender is protected under the 14th Amendment Equal Protection Clause, right? So when it comes to the Equal Protection Clause, you can't simply say, I don't want this teacher because they are a woman. I don't want this teacher because they look this way, because they are black, because they are gay. That is completely and utterly protected under the 14th Amendment, right? Now, when it comes to private businesses, we've had Supreme Court cases that have been kind of sustained saying, yeah, okay, fine. Somebody who's making wedding cakes doesn't have to make a wedding cake for a gay couple. It's a private business. These are public institutions, right? So these are not private institutions, right? So when I say specifically, oh no, you can't pull a kid from a class because you don't want the teacher being gay, I'm not saying you shouldn't be able to. I'm saying legally try me in court and see how it works out for you. Not to be cocky.
People did. What happened there? How did it play out?
Well, 1,000% people did. And I think actually, it's so funny that I actually made a recent TikTok on this, right? People did. And I was 22. Right? I was out. This was my first year teaching. I was a child. I was out of college.
Sorry, were you wearing makeup then?
1,000%. I've been wearing makeup since I was 12, right? So I've worn makeup since I was 12 years old. I was fresh out of Dartmouth College, Teach for America. We're trained in a summer. I'm given a class of 25 kids by myself. You really thought that my first day of teaching after parents switch out of my class, I'm going to raise hell about, this is unfair. 1,000% no, right? Now, me at, 8 years later at the age of 30 with a master's degree, now I would put up a little bit more of a fight. Again, as long as it's in the child's best interest, right? Not my best interest. But at the time, I was still learning to be a good teacher. At the time, I didn't have as much confidence in my teaching abilities, right? So, and again, also not as much confidence in my legal background. But that idea of like, oh, well, how did it play out? Well, 3 of the kids switched back in and I was known as one of the best teachers, right? That's how it works. But, I did let it happen. The administration did let it happen. And that's something that I think shouldn't have happened, but did. And it is what it is.
So I do want to ask you about this because I played a clip on the show of you a little while back. I've played a couple clips of you, a couple times where you said things I agreed with and a couple times where you said things I don't agree with.
I'm okay with that.
This is one of the ones where I didn't quite agree. I don't want to mischaracterize you, but you essentially said something like, the indoctrination you're worried about in schools doesn't exist.
I'm a non-binary, bisexual, learning specialist and teacher. These are the conversations that you're very afraid of.
Are you a boy or a girl?
I was born a boy. Good question. Back to math, though.
Why do you wear makeup?
I like the way it makes me look. Pretty simple. Same reason why other people wear it.
Are you married? Do you have a girlfriend?
I can't answer that. That's personal information. It doesn't have to do with school.
Your makeup is pretty. Am I allowed to wear makeup?
Thanks for saying it's pretty. I'm not allowed to give you makeup at school. That's up to you and your parents.
Why does your makeup make you so, tan?
I'm actually black. I'm Italian and Nigerian. Good question.
Do I call you Mr. or Miss?
You could just call me Desmond, but in the end, I can't control what you call me.
All jokes and reindeer antlers aside, the conversations that you're so worried about are very, very easy and very, very fast. Kids are not as confused as you think they are. I'm a guy who wears makeup. You want to call it non-binary gender fluid? Fine. And here's the kicker. Kids don't actually care about sexuality. They're not actually going to ask. And if they do, pretty simple to tell them that they've overstepped. And that's a personal matter that doesn't have anything to do with school. The indoctrination you're afraid of isn't real. I hope this helps.
Oh, yeah. Oh, gosh, yeah.
So we can talk about it, and I will insert that TikTok, but I'll just tell you this. I don't work in the education system. I don't have kids. So and there's not obviously good data on this. So I have no way of telling you it is pervasive that there's ideological. Right. But what I can tell you is I have seen at this point hundreds, dozens and dozens, if maybe hundreds of videos of teachers talking about how they explain non-binary to their preschoolers, or how they talk about gender identity and all this gender stuff to their first graders. And so when you say it doesn't exist, I found that hard to believe, and I felt like that wasn't true.
Well, first of all, no, not actually. First of all, holistically, I think you bring up a great point. And I think, first of all, just so you know, based on how this conversation is going, I will come back on this podcast anytime, because you bring up a very good point of an instance on TikTok and social media where I say something and it makes perfect sense in my head, and yet I didn't have a holistic amount of time and a full amount of time to explain really what I'm thinking, right? When I say the indoctrination of that you're afraid of doesn't exist, right? I'm talking about gay teachers that wear makeup trying to turn kids gay, right? I'm well aware, no offense to people, I'm well aware that there are overly ambitious allies right now. I'm well aware of that. I have overly ambitious parents that are allies that explain to kids that I'm actually trans and I'm not trans, right? I'm well aware that there are overly ambitious allies that might be teaching gender ideology, that might be a little bit gung-ho about this is what sexuality is, this is what gender is, and this does happen in the classroom. But the specific indoctrination of somebody who is queer teaching kids to be gay, I have seen no documented cases of it at all, right? And that's what I mean specifically by the indoctrination you're worried about isn't real. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but I'm saying the demon that you've created, the gay teacher, the guy that wears makeup that turns kids gay, is not real. You might see it, again, usually it tends to be, not to stereotype, but if you do look at the demographics, it's usually kind of the white, female, liberal allies that really push the gender in classrooms.
Yes.
But I'm just saying, if you look at the statistics, it's actually the white female straight allies that are actually the most gung-ho about gender in the classroom, right? Saying things that I would not dare to say. But that's a different demographic. That's a different kind of indoctrination than the one that I am seeing pervasively said is occurring, which to me, I don't see me doing it. I see a different demographic doing it. The one that I do isn't real. But the one that others do, yeah, I've seen that too, just like I've seen religious indoctrination, critical race theory indoctrination on both sides of it. I've seen a lot of gender indoctrinations when it comes to education. But the specific one about that gay teacher turning kids gay is not one that I see very frequently, or I've seen no study cases of it.
First off, I don't think anybody can be turned gay, right?
No, it's not possible, right? Yeah.
Right. But I agree with you. It's often not actually gay people. It's either straight white allies, or it's like posers, people who are bisexual but actually aren't, or people
Very dangerous topics you're bringing up.
People who are just want to be part of the acronym, so they call themselves like sapiosexual or something that doesn't really mean much. But what I will also say, it's so interesting, the point that you just made about how it's not actually the gay teachers who are broaching often the inappropriate indoctrination territory. I worked with kids for years at the YMCA as an adult in college and everything else, and I would never bring up my sexuality to them. No,
it's extremely dangerous for both of us.
Any way. In fact, as a gay person, I was hypersensitive about never doing that.
Never doing it. There's no way, right? So I think that's what people don't understand, is that idea of, well, we are under the magnifying glass 24/7, especially as male educators, right? You at the YMCA, I am the type where I will not go into a people. Do you use the women or boys? Do you use the girls' bathroom or the boys' bathroom? Bro, I'm not going to use any bathroom if the child is in it. Based on my appearance, I don't trust anyone's perception of me in a bathroom. I'm using the private bathroom. I don't trust. I trust myself. I don't trust other people in the bathroom when it comes to me. I don't trust about the stories you're going to tell about me. So we are hyper aware of this, especially as gay male individuals, right? And I think that so goes under the radar because I make a very crude, almost dark humor joke, right? But that idea of like, if you really were a predator at this point in 2024, being trans or wearing makeup would be the last outfit you would want to wear because everyone thinks you're a predator already. So like,
and they're going to be paying more attention to you.
They're paying so much attention to you. It's like, obviously, we don't do this to blend in, right? Like, your eyes are on us. So we need to, cross our T's, dot our I's on every situation. And I uphold that standard, right? And I'm proud to uphold that standard, but it's tricky. So I'm also, happy that you have that background.
So I do want to ask you about something, and I want to try to do so tactfully and respectfully, but actually still articulate my true belief.
Feel free to shoot straight with me if needed.
You identify as non-binary, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
What does that mean to you?
That's a really great question, actually, because I feel like it means different things to different people. So I'll break it down in a way that I think is easiest for everyone to understand. If we are going to live in a society with assumed gender roles that don't fall under logical circumstances, for example, not, men are supposed to do this and women are supposed to do this based on biology, but more of men tend to like blue, girls tend to like pink. Men don't wear makeup, girls do. If we have a set of rules that are in a binary, guys tend to do this, girls tend to do this, right? And those rules are binary, you tend to not break out of it. If that is the binary that we are going to decide to live on in a society, and we have created that binary, my holistic, individualistic person, Desmond Fambrini, does not fit on said binary. I would not be one of the two camps. Therefore, not saying that I am biologically any different than your classic XY chromosomal male. I'm saying based on your societal definition of how a male acts and how a female acts and how a male is supposed to behave and how a female is supposed to behave, if you create that gender binary, I'm going to tell you my behavior is not going to fit on it. And that is what I mean by non-binary.
Okay. I do understand what you mean. Okay. I have long held the view that non-binary is not a legitimate concept.
I understand what you mean.
In the sense that first off, I'm glad you acknowledge that you are not biologically a difference, not male or female.
Biologically
that
male.
puts us in the same stratosphere, because sometimes I talk to people and they're like, I'm non-binary, it means I'm not a male or I'm not a female.
XY chromosome.
You still are. But if we're talking about gender as a distinct concept from sex, we can have a conversation here. But here's my problem with non-binary, and I just want to hear your thoughts on this. Inadvertently, perhaps, you, in your explanation of it, just reinforced crude gender stereotypes that I don't think should exist. I think it should be perfectly fine for a male to wear pink or wear makeup or not like sports or do whatever is traditionally feminine, all of which is beyond the biology, all of which is made up, all of which is relative to a current social and cultural norm. And I want to break down those gender stereotypes so it's okay for a little girl to have short hair and like trucks and doesn't have to like makeup or dolls. I don't want to tell her that if she does, well, she's not a woman then.
She's not a woman
She has
anymore.
to be a third thing. Because I actually think then you are forcing people into, you're reinforcing that same archaic system that progressives and feminists and liberals and this whole crowd that supports the non-binary notion is supposed to be against. The whole thing seems incredibly self-defeating to me.
Really good point. Well, okay, then I'll even venture into very scary areas to talk about because I feel like it can be misquoted. So what I'm about to say can in fact be misquoted. Something that I don't talk about on TikTok because it's so kind of difficult to talk about. But that idea of people go, oh, well, you were born into a very accepting family. And your family, right? Like, you know, your family allowed you to kind of experiment with what you wanted to experiment with. You could play with makeup at a young age. you know, if you weren't born into such an accepting family, hi Megan, if you weren't born into such an accepting family, would you still be wearing the makeup? And I would be like, well, honestly, if I wasn't born into such an accepting family, maybe I would actually be trans, right? And the reason I say that is because if I was not allowed to express myself the way that I was, maybe I would think to myself, well, everything about me is wrong. Maybe I'm not even male. Maybe I'm supposed to be female. Maybe I'm supposed to have long hair. Maybe I need to holistically go to the other side of it. But because I was given that option of no, boys can do things girls could do, I'm simply me. I'm biologically male. If non-binary is a terminology that helps you understand my holistic position in today's society, that is one position that you could say. If you just want to say, oh, you're a guy, that's fine with me too. I really don't care. Language is supposed to convey meaning to others, not yourself, right? You're supposed to use your own descriptors to help other people understand you, not verify yourself as an individual. It's not what language was created for. So I understand that perspective and would even go further to say, yeah, I get that. I think the only piece maybe missing is there are biological aspects of the female condition and male condition where sometimes people can be more stereotypically female action oriented when it comes to biology based on like the oxytocin, testosterone, estrogen levels. That could also kind of explain some non-binary behavior, but no, you're not off base, right? And of course the pushback of, well, I also am fine taking that label off, right? Like holistically, I'm not going to enforce any binary. If you say, oh, well, then I don't believe in a binary whatsoever and guys could do whatever, then I'm like, well, then I'll just be Desmond to you and I really don't care what you, then it's whatever. So I see your perspective on that.
So I want to, people can decide for themselves how they feel about all that, but I want to ask you about a couple of things, because one of the things that's interesting to me is I know that you don't push politics on students. You don't disclose, you're not an ideological activist. You just discuss things in your own way. You do, at least on these issues, come off as more on the progressive side on these gender issues. And so, but TikTok being the interesting space that it is, ultra progressive lefties still seem to be mad at you with a high degree of frequency. What have you done to make the ultra woke TikTok crowd suddenly not like you?
I think one of the largest things is there are boundaries. I have a 4-year kind of degree from Dartmouth College, gender studies and government double major. When it comes to gender ideology, I've studied it, right? So it's tricky when people say, well, there are absolutely no rules, right? For example, well, I am asexual and gender fluid and a lesbian. I'm like, well, like, you know what I mean? Like, you could say that you're whatever the heck you want, but like, how, right? Like, and I think when I give that, I'm so sorry. Oh my God. And I'm so sorry if whoever watching this identifies as that. But when I hear these things, I actually am not one of those ones that are just going to be like, yeah, you can be whatever you want. Like, I'm actually going to logically break down, like, you're asexual. You don't tend to have physical attraction. You're lesbian. You're a woman who loves a woman. You're gender fluid, which means you feel that you shift on the gender binary. Like you said, it's not mathing, right? There's something not adding up here. And I think that pushback of like, well, it's not hurting anyone. Well, that's a very low bar.
I think some lesbians might also disagree that if you're eroding the legitimacy of their identity, if you're eroding
1000%.
the coherency of who they are, for example, if somebody says I'm a non-binary gay person, I'm like,
yeah,
well, no, being gay means you're a man who loves men. So
right.
To say it's harmless, you're not punching anyone. I agree.
No, absolutely not. Right.
You're kind of eroding the concept, the legitimacy of a concept that was fought very hard to be accepted and normalized. So I don't agree it's totally harmless when they push stuff that makes no sense.
You know what? And I would have to change my opinion and say that I actually agree with your perspective on that one. And I would even venture further to say that as an educator, specifically a special educator, right? My MS is in special education. When people go, oh, well, xeno and neo pronouns are used by neurodivergent people. Whoa.
Can you explain what those are for listeners? Neo
like that idea of like, I identify as like buttercup self, cat self, right? First of all, I'll call you a cat. I will call you whatever the heck you want. I really don't care.
You're nicer than me. I will not call you a cat.
And that's fine. I am one of those. That's okay. I am one of those people where, hey, listen, I am on planet Earth for 80 to 100 years. I'd like to give people like a little bit of happiness, right? I've done fairly well for myself already. Let's just spread the joy. You want me to call you a freaking spider web? I will call you a spider web, right? But, okay, there are a couple things that we need to like clarify before I call you a spider web. One, spider is not a pronoun. A pronoun replaces a noun. Spiders are actually still he, she, or its, right? Spiders have pronouns. So you can't say, oh, well, spider is a neopronoun. Spiders themselves have pronouns, right? So no, spider is not a pronoun. It's a nickname, right? Oh, well, neopronouns like spider self are used by neurodivergent people. That is quite possibly the most infuriating argument. As somebody who has ADHD, OCD, and is actually currently being tested for being on the spectrum, one of the most infuriating things that I've ever heard. Because one, saying neurodivergent people are, xenopronoun, neopronoun. First of all, you've just bunched OCD, ADHD, ASD, upset, like all of these conditions that are completely differentiated. You just bunched them all together. And what you really, I think, mean is the idea of, well, autism sometimes has some social kind of perceptual issues, where the idea of gender, it being a social construct, is sometimes hard for people that are autistic to understand. Okay, but that doesn't mean that you therefore need to justify that lack of understanding. That's a little bit different. Now, yes, I completely understand, right? Those on the spectrum, again, I might be on the spectrum, which is why my perception of gender is 1,000% societally constructed. But that idea of, okay, well, people that are neurodivergent therefore need to identify as water bottles. No. In fact, you're actually, as somebody who is an advocate, right, for
offensive.
people that it's offensive. It's 1,000% offensive. That's crazy. And unfortunately, sometimes the loudest are the minority, right? There's a lot of people that are actually on the spectrum. I can holistically tell you, by the way, I cannot give away any information on my students. I could say I have dozens of students with autism, dozens, all at different levels of autism. Not a single one has ever asked me to use a xeno or neo pronoun for them. And you know that I would if they asked me. I would do anything for my students, right? Like within reason. And not a single neo or xeno pronoun user. It is all the self-diagnosed autistic people on TikTok. And that really makes me upset.
Talk about self-diagnosis for a minute. Is that legit?
Oh, you're really going to get me canceled by an entire, because everyone hates me. Who even cares at this point? Self-diagnosing actually 100% used to be legitimate, right? Because we had an 80% hit rate when it came to self-diagnosing autism or something absurdly high like that. What was the statistic? I'll look it up later. But it was like people that were self-diagnosing and asking for autism assessments hit the mark like 70 to 80% of the time. Like they were holistically accurate in their self-diagnosis, right? Now it's nonsense. Now we have people, this is why a certain side of TikTok hates me. It's like, well, I have DID and I have 40 different personalities and they all have different pronouns. Do you know what dissociative identity disorder is? Like, do you really know what that is? Do you know
how incredibly rare
and how it's underdiagnosed? Where are your statistics on this? Look, I'm schizophrenic. Do you know the onset of schizophrenia is 20 to 25 in men? You're telling me that you're a female assigned at birth individual self-diagnosing as schizophrenic and DID at the age of 12?
And you spend all your time on TikTok looking at DID.
I'm like, come on,
TikTokers.
right? I'm sorry, right? I'm like, there's no way. There's no way, right? So I'm like, that can't, I'm not trying to delegitimize people. I'm not. I've gotten into these conversations multiple times with people saying, hey, listen, like, I understand your identity. I understand that you think that something's going on. I understand things might be off. I understand that you might not feel right. You don't necessarily need to take a diagnosis and say, I have this, respect it. And the reason, lastly, because I had actually a creator that is a teacher who's also a special educator, who goes, well, people self-diagnose illnesses all the time. Yes, but it's when you're trying to get an actual diagnosis. When you're actually trying, I might be not feeling well. Well, what do you do when you might not be feeling well? You don't start taking antibiotics. That's not what you start doing. You go to the doctor. You go to the doctor, period. And that, I'm not seeing that process right now. I'm seeing a lot of people blame capitalism for not being able to get a diagnosis. And I really think, and this is going to sound harsh, this is the side that people don't usually see, because usually I'm a little bit more congenial and happy-go-lucky on TikTok, is if they put a minimal amount of effort on finding a diagnosis, a fractional amount of effort based on the amount of effort they put on finding other people that agree with them, we might have a different result as far as diagnostics is considered. Sorry, I said it.
I totally get it. I did want to ask you about something without wading into the actual issue itself.
Yes.
You have been getting death threats from Free Palestine people for saying, and I haven't
Why am I
actually
laughing? I'm sorry. Yeah.
seen your take
Like-
on Israel. I highly doubt that you're a bloodthirsty warmonger. It doesn't
I
really
really am
seem
not
your
into
vibe.
that. Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I'm
not my
guessing you
vibe.
said something somewhat moderate or centrist about the conflict, and now you're getting death threats from the
Yeah.
Free Palestine people? Tell us about this.
The idea of my thinking that simply Israel has the right to exist. It seems like a lot of people seem to have severe issues with this. Now, I'm not saying that Palestine doesn't deserve an infrastructure, but just the idea that Israel has a right to be there. It has caused an intense hatred of me, that I've actually received multiple threats due to, to this fact. Just because I feel like a lot of people very quickly follow trends on social media without looking into the history. I do get confused when people say, Israel is on stolen land. As an educator, right? I look back at the 4,000 years of history and I see the Semites that were then there in 2000 BCE that were then removed for Egypt. They made their way back. They were kicked out by the Ottoman Empire. They were kicked out by the Babylonians before the Ottoman Empire. They were finally reestablished after the British Empire fell, and finally given land in 1948 after the diaspora, after the Holocaust. And I'm like, how are you starting the story at 1948? And just my saying that seems to really make people upset. So that, yes, I get quite a few threats based
It's
just
crazy
because
how
I
they
want.
they can't even tolerate a minor different opinion. That's not even an extreme opinion.
Well, it's
But
not
that's
even it's very scary to me, right? Because I gotta tell you, I have students that are, I have students that have ties to Palestine. I also have students that are Jewish, right? And I'm not okay just being all like, well, Israel shouldn't exist. That's not okay with me. Like, that's not, that will never be okay with me. They have the right to exist just like Palestinians have the right to exist. Like, that's crazy.
crazy that that's a hot take that would get you death threats, but that's
And yet,
TikTok
here
for
I
ya.
am.
All right, Desmond. Well, this has been a blast. We had some tech issues, but we made it through. We're running low on
We did
time,
it.
but you'll have to come back because there's so much more to discuss. But thank you so much for coming on the show.
I would absolutely love that. Sorry, we're crunched for time. And always tech issues are fun, but I had an absolute blast. And I actually hope I am invited back soon because I would love to have another conversation.
All right, thank you. All right, guys, that is it for this episode of the Damage Control Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Don't forget to hit that like button if you're watching us on YouTube. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please take a second and rate and review the show. And do consider sharing it with somebody who you know who might enjoy the podcast. And with that, we'll talk again next week.